When it comes to planning a retreat, there's ways to get it to go from average to incredibly transformative. Welcome to Retreat Boss, where we speak about inspired travel for fun, transformation, and profit. Guest experts will give you their tips and tricks on creating the most impactful retreats, both for you and your clients. Whether you want a meditative getaway, a wellness trip, or a business escapade, we provide you with the best advice in organizing and hosting a tremendous event. Join Catherine Contos as she talks with fellow experts about creating exclusive and successful retreats. Dive deep into the most unique activities, the best destinations to visit, and the most uplifting trips out there that you can discover. Here is your host, Catherine Contos. Elissa Kaner is an attorney for online entrepreneurs, has certifications in the area of neuro-linguistic programming, hypnotherapy, and life and success coaching. Welcome to the Retreat Boss podcast.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm so excited to be here.
One thing I knew when I first, we kind of met in a social media group. And when I heard you were a lawyer that, was really interested in the retreat space and that you had clients that hired you for that, I was like, I absolutely need this woman on the show because it's such a big need in the industry. And some people sometimes don't even think of the legal aspects, and there's a lot of big liability that could happen during a retreat. So I'm very happy to have you on here today to shed some light and some of your expertise on this subject.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited. This is such an important topic, and it's often very, very overlooked by a lot of entrepreneurs because people tend to stick their head in the sand a little bit when it comes to legal and just kind of hope and pray that everything will work out. And that is just the opposite of what we want to do. We want to make sure that they are protected from the get-go, especially hosting a retreat internationally, where so many things, so many variables, so much liability, so many things could happen, that we just want to make sure that, you're protected from day one and avoid any issues down the line.
Absolutely. And I don't understand why people would avoid it, because not for anything, for sure, you're covered legally when you have, whatever it is, whether it's waivers or full on contracts, you're protected. Yes, that's one thing, but it also gives a clear message to the people that are signing of what your terms are and what expectations are, and vice versa. So it's not only good for legal reasons, but it's also good for clarity. And it's a step that really should not be skipped, because that's when, even if you have a misunderstanding that doesn't go the legal route, eventually it leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And that's the one thing that you need to avoid as in any customer service, industry, because you are servicing clients. So, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like a lawyer should maybe just go through any waiver or contract, or even maybe the application process, just to make sure things are clear? They're clear at the right time too, right? And all of that. What's your suggestion?
Oh, absolutely. This is such a loaded question. And I really think one of the things that I tell my clients and any podcast, anyone that I speak to in a group, I always say that forget the legal. I mean, don't forget it, but forget the legal. One of the most important aspects of having an agreement is laying out exactly what for retreats, what the retreat entails, what you're going to be doing, the pricing, all the things that the client is agreeing on, because it's really, and any expectations you have for the client. So even if you besides all the legal jargon, it's important to make sure that, you as the retreat host is going to deliver what you say you're going to deliver, and exactly what you say you're going to deliver. And then also, if you have any expectations from the client, any rules or any do's and don'ts, anything like that can go in the contract, and the client is signing it. And so they know the expectations from them. So both sides, it's kind of like a document that defines the relationship, as well as sets aside some legal pieces that are very important too.
And this goes as well with suppliers, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Anything, any relationship.
Anything and everything when it comes to
Mhm.
relationships. Absolutely. Because, and a lot of times there might be something I find, like in my experience, I find that sometimes we just don't think about something, it's just, we don't know. We just don't know what we don't know. And we just don't think about it. And when you do hire an expert, first of all, it's, a third set of eyes, let's say you have a partner or your clients, it's a third set of eyes. It's someone who's unbiased, and can really shed light on things that you maybe never even thought of. So
100%, 100%. It's so important. Even if I always stress that it's really important to make sure that you have an attorney either right from scratch, or you send your contract that you're about to send to anyone, any client, any suppliers, any vendors, any independent contractors, anything. It's so important to have an attorney and a non-biased opinion looking over those contracts to make sure that they cover everything. Because if especially if you're trying to, you pick one up from, you find someone's template or something that someone gives you, or you find it on Google, you may not know, if you don't ask, what you don't know and what else needs to be in there. And so it's really, really, really important to have an attorney look at the contract at the very least.
yes,
Absolutely.
we at Retreat Boss, we have in our course, we have actually offered the students, and even our clients, we offer registration forms, group rules, waivers, and contracts that have been made by a lawyer. But we do tell them you have to absolutely run it by your lawyer, because it's your business and it has to be really specific to your business. So that obviously reduces the costs, because it's just
Mhm.
a review rather than like starting from scratch. And but some people do take templates off the internet and think that that's good enough. How do you feel about that?
I do not, I do not endorse that, because exactly what you said, Catherine, it needs to be a contract, needs to be specific to your business. And even though maybe there are some terms that would work in that template, it's really, really, really important to have something that is tailored exactly specifically to you and your business. And a template on Google is just not gonna, it's not gonna cut it for that. So we want to make sure that you are covered in every area, and we've got all four corners covered. We've made sure that all the terms are correct. And sometimes if you take, there's just such simple things, like I've seen some of my clients that come to me after the fact that have contracts where they live in the state of Michigan, but the governing law in the contract that they found says California, and it's like, no, 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 like things like that you wouldn't even think and an attorney would know. It's just really important to make sure that someone is reviewing it, or making sure that it's tailored for you.
Right. And what you're saying on that, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times retreats are international. So, you have to tweak it, I guess, right? Like to
Mm-hmm.
to to fit that location. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, so for that, I mean, I don't want to get too nitty gritty with like governing laws, but yeah, I mean, it can be, it's usually whatever law that you agree upon. But of course, if someone's going to be doing something illegal in Mexico, that's something that maybe the contract wouldn't even cover. It's kind of like, this is beyond the scope. But we want to make sure that you're covered internationally, and that any like COVID restrictions that the country has, you want to make sure that that's in the contract. Anything, and that kind of stuff is subject to change so quickly, and could change in between the client registering for the retreat and then the date of the retreat, and maybe the borders close or something like that. So we want to make sure that you as the retreat host is completely covered from, like, what if you can't run the retreat on that date because all of a sudden the borders are closed for wherever you're going to have it. And you want to make sure that you have, backup measures in place, and terms in place that will govern, those situations.
Yes, we never think about, also us getting sick as hosts or as planners.
Mhm.
It could, we always think,
Absolutely.
oh, something happens to somebody else, but it could happen where it's like, I can't make it. Guess what? There's no retreat,
Yeah,
right?
it
Which
did
is
happen.
awful, but
Actually, it did happen to one of my clients, actually. And, luckily, 9 people out of 10 were able to reschedule at a new date and everything was okay. But that's something that is definitely needs to be covered in a contract because it happens. It absolutely happens. We don't think about it, but I've seen it happen.
so so there's different aspects in a retreat. First of all, you become a travel planner, not necessarily a travel agent, but that there's a whole other legal aspect to that. But you become a travel planner. You become an event planner because a retreat is an event. You are a host with a program. You have guests who are traveling with you, whether it's local or international. You have hospitality. You have food, right? There's a lot of stuff to think about. You have food. Then what else? I'm just like thinking. You have suppliers,
Yeah.
right? So whether it's activities that are in-house or external, and yeah, but you might have them contracted versus not. So these are a lot of different things that we have to think about. How do you feel like this would be all covered in one contract, I guess, with the guests and another one with the suppliers? Like how would you really make sure that everybody's protected, and for liability mostly, right? And injury.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would want, so there's a bunch of separate contracts that you mentioned right there. So there would be one between the host and the clients, the attendees. And then if you're bringing anyone in, like let's say you're bringing in a private chef, you would want to have a contract with that person. You would also want to have a contract with, if you hire a separate event planner that will be on site, you want to have, or some sort of a, retreat planner, you want to have a contract with that person. You want to have a contract with anybody that you will be hiring out to as part of running the retreat. And so if there's any liabilities involved in those jobs, then you would want to have, something in there that's limiting their liability. So I think that's limiting your liability and their in the event of injury. So we want to make sure that you are covered with every single person. So there's a lot we could talk about there for sure.
So who's responsible to make up the contract? Okay, for obviously for your guests, it's the planner or the host,
Mhm.
whatever whoever that may be. But what about like your venue, your yoga instructor, if you hire one, your chef, who who should uh, be the one drafting?
Yeah.
Is there a rule?
No, there's no rule. That's a really good question, but I think so it depends on the situation, right? So if you are bringing in, I actually recently worked on some contracts for one of my clients that's running a retreat where she's bringing in all of her own people. So we wrote up contracts for each person. So she's bringing in an event planner, and that event planner will be staying at the house. She's bringing in some yoga fitness instructors, they'll be staying at the house. So in that case, and sometimes they'll be actually participating in some of the activities. So in that case, I would say, have the host write all those contracts. But it's also possible that, let's say you hire a chef, like if you're hosting a retreat in Costa Rica and you hired a private chef for the house, they may have their own agreement. If they do, then great, and you can read it. You can have an attorney read it also, review it, and see if it's something that you want to sign. And if it's not, then you can introduce your own. There's not really a rule. It's just kind of standard practices for each person. So if they have if the chef already has a contract, Airbnb, the venues usually have their own,
Right.
which makes sense because then they have their own rules that they set for the venues, right? So that is usually something that you don't have to worry about. But to have, if you're bringing in anybody, I would absolutely say write up a contract, and you can always negotiate the terms if they have their own. So you can always work together to come to an agreement that is going to define the relationship for the two of you that you both can, you'll both be happy with.
Here's where I find people are a bit like they feel a little touchy about it is when they
Mhm.
bring in volunteers to help. And usually these volunteers, most of the time, are friends.
Mm.
So how should someone proceed with volunteers? Maybe with their friends or they're not friends, but especially when they're friends, like it's touchy, right? So
Yeah.
what would be your approach? Would there still be a contract there in your opinion?
I would say absolutely yes. I think there should be. I think that especially if they're volunteers and they're, going to be having fun in Mexico or Florida and they're going to be able to participate in some of the retreats, I think laying out the expectations of the volunteers is so important. And I know, so you mentioned another thing that you kind of mentioned is that sometimes contracts can be contentious or feel contentious, even if it's with friends, absolutely it can, but also even if it's just a regular client, you're like, oh, you have to make me sign a contract. I don't know how I feel about that.
Mm,
But I like to reframe that because it's defining the relationship, right? It's not, here, sign this, you're waiving all your rights away. No, it's making sure that, you as the retreat host is delivering everything that you are expected to deliver. And then that person as the client or the friend or the volunteer or the, event planner, whoever is on the other side of the contract, it's laying out their expectations as well. So it protects both the host and the person on the other side of the agreement. And so I like to say that it's not contentious because it's like open communication, really, is how we need to look at it, instead of, oh, one person has all the rights, the other person doesn't. It's not like that at all.
yeah. I agree with that, and that's what we always suggest, everything has to be clearly defined, even the group rules,
Mhm.
that way, when something does happen, we're dynamic people, dynamics change with every person you add and every person that leaves. And things could change really fast. And if at least it was set up in the rules and people read it and signed it, even if it's not, let's say, a legal contract where you have to go through a lawyer, at least they are aware of what is expected as far as behavior, as part of, I don't know, like group settings, whatever it may be. Um, so yeah, the other thing, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. So
Yeah.
somebody says, well, I have insurance to cover me for all that, right? Or vice versa. They could turn around and say, well, I have legals, I don't need insurance. But that's for another show. I actually have somebody else coming in talking about insurance. But let's say somebody says, I have insurance for that. I'm covered. I don't need contracts because if anything happens, I just like claim it to the insurance and I don't have to worry about it. What if someone thinks like that? Like, what do you feel would be the situation if something should happen there?
Oh, okay. So that is two those are two totally different things, right? Because when are you saying in the context of the host or in the context of a client?
No, I'm saying we're always speaking about the host or
Yeah,
the
okay, that's what I
planner.
thought.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe they'll have a contract with the client, but maybe they won't have other issues. I don't know, like other contracts where they feel like, no, I'm covered from my insurance, liability or whatever it may be, planner insurance, whatever it is. I'm
Okay.
covered.
Okay.
I'm good. They said they'll cover me for liability. They'll cover me for cancellation, injury. What do I
Mhm.
need to pay a lawyer to have a whole contract drawn up for?
Oh, so I see what you're saying. Okay, so yes, you absolutely need one because if you have insurance, that doesn't stop your ability from getting sued. You can still get sued and maybe the insurance will cover a lawsuit, maybe it won't. It depends on your policy.
Mm,
So it's not insurance is not foolproof. Yes, it can help you in the event that something goes wrong, which is super important, especially when you're international, but it doesn't actually limit your liability. It's just, say something goes wrong, someone gets hurt on your watch, that person can sue the retreat host, but maybe insurance will cover some of the costs. That's really, insurance is about cost covering, not necessarily lawsuits and legal protection. So I would say that you absolutely need both because you want to make sure that you are limiting your ability to be sued in the event that something goes wrong or there's injury or something like that during the retreat.
yeah. Is there anything we covered so much? Is there anything we didn't cover that you'd like to add that maybe we didn't touch base on here?
Yeah, so I think it's really, really, really important. So I would say that it's super important to have waivers of all kinds. We didn't fully cover that. I think
Right.
it depends on, what the retreat is about, but it having a waiver about COVID is so important these days, unfortunately, but it is. Everyone needs to have that so that it's, everyone's signing that they know that it's personal responsibility, right?
Mhm.
When you go on a retreat, maybe you'll get sick. Maybe you'll get someone else sick. You need to sign, so you need to have a waiver waiving, you're not going to sue the host in the event that there's a COVID outbreak or something like that.
Right.
That is super important. And then if you're doing any, physical activity, even yoga, very, very, breath work, anything that could somehow conceivably even in like 1 in a million cause somebody injury, you need to have liability waivers in place for those things.
Mhm.
And the clients need to sign. And it depends on, it totally depends whether you need that or not in your contract, depends on whether the facilitator or the instructor or whatever is has their own. So, but you want to make sure in the contracts that you have some clause somewhere, even if it's not a full-on liability waiver, limiting your liability for any injury for all the activities that may occur at the retreat. So that's definitely something I would say number one. And then for insurance, I would say that it's really important in the contract just to say, you know what, every client on this, especially if you're going international, this may be not necessarily that important for the States, but if you're going international, I would say that it's super important to say that everyone has to have their own travel insurance.
I
Because
absolutely agree.
yeah, you never know what could happen.
Right, because if something does go wrong, okay, you're the host and the other guests. Well, something happens to somebody, then it becomes, you're obviously affected, and it becomes a burden on everybody else, including the host. And what are you
Mhm.
gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do? Leave this person, there and just leave? Like
Exactly,
I would
exactly.
feel like so responsible for them, because you are
Yeah,
responsible for them.
you
So,
are.
what are you gonna do? This person doesn't have insurance now. What a
Yeah, and like
nightmare.
let's say for something, like what if if they get COVID and they have to stay in a hotel for however long before they can come back to the US, that's something that they have to have insurance for that.
Right.
Obviously, the retreat host is not going to cover that. Um, it's gonna get really expensive. Or if somebody, like, let's say they're on a hike and they fall and they break their leg, they need to have their health insurance will not be covered in Costa Rica or Mexico if they
Right.
live in the United States, right? So they have to have, that's what travel insurance does. And it also, in the event that, something happens to the retreat has to get moved, then that helps protect your flight and all the expenses that you paid. So
Exactly.
it's super important.
And also, if something should happen, like a cancellation, by the retreat host or whatever, your
Mhm.
travel insurance should cover part of it at least.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's also the other waiver that we didn't discuss yet, which is media release waivers.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
let's place a situation here where everybody signs a media release form, but one person's like, not interested. Okay, I'm not signing this. I don't want to be on social media. I don't want to be in any type of advertising. I just don't want. What do you suggest in this case should be done when there's someone
Yeah.
that is intent in, because you're doing group stuff, right? And I can control myself, but what about the rest of the people? Like, they don't have a contract with this person. Like, how
Yep.
do you work this? This is a little difficult.
This is a really difficult situation. And I think, and so this is one of those things where I think you should have the media release in, when you send over the original client contract, it
Mhm.
should be in there and it should be very clear that, hey, listen, we reserve the right to take photos. Like, let's say there's gonna be a photographer on site for the whole retreat documenting everything. And to make sure that this person knows from before they even pay or after they pay, saying, hey, listen, like, we're gonna, sign a media release because we reserve the right to use all photos and videos in our marketing. And if it's really, there's this one person, maybe honestly at that point, maybe it's time for that person to decide whether or not they even want to go on the retreat, because it's going to be really difficult for the photographer if they're like, oh, Susie doesn't want to be in anything. Susie doesn't want to be on the website. She doesn't want to be on Instagram. She doesn't want to be, in any marketing for the next retreat. So anytime you take a photo, Susie can't be in it. That's going to be really difficult.
Very.
So I think it's good to, and it's another reason why we want to have all terms laid out from day one before they even are buying their plane tickets, and they know that, hey, if I go to this retreat, I'm going to have to be in marketing videos. I may be able to avoid as many photos as possible, but there's no guarantee that, with group shots, but she's just not going to be in any of the group shots. So I think it's important to let people know that from the get-go, so that if they're like, no, I really don't feel comfortable with this, they can say no to the retreat. I would say, I mean, because if you send that, right before they're about to leave, and she's like, oh my God, I didn't know that was going to happen. I thought we were just going to be anonymous, and it was just going to be this really beautiful unplugged experience where, if I didn't want to take pictures and I didn't want to be in pictures, I didn't have to be. That's a whole other issue that may be a problem. And, you as the retreat host, maybe you can't really kick her out when it's a week before the retreat.
Right.
But if they know ahead of time, there will be a photographer. I mean, you can't control the women on the women that are there. You can't really control what they post.
Great. The women or men.
Or men. Absolutely. Sorry. Anyone on any attendees. I'm just like thinking my women's retreats.
Right.
But yeah, like, you can't really control other people, but your media release is protecting you.
Okay.
It's not for any of the other attendees on, posting things on Instagram. That's between, if someone posts something if an attendee posts a group shot that, Susie doesn't like of herself, like, that's something that she would have to take up with that person. But for the media releases, for you, the host.
So I guess any deal breaker that you think would be a deal breaker for a client, whether it's physical, maybe there's physical restraints or like something that they would not be able to participate.
Yeah.
Or if it's an activity that people might know, like a silent retreat. I think I mentioned it to you before, where somebody signed up for a retreat. They had no idea it was a silent retreat, and they were when they showed up, they were like, what do you mean I can't speak for a week?
Yeah, exactly. Anything like that, like, you need to lay it out on the freaking sales page, because people need to know, if you're not going to be able to speak for a week, like, that's a big deal.
That
like,
is a huge deal.
How would this person have gotten from, okay, this retreat sounds fun, to signing out, to getting there, to having no idea? Like, that is where it's like, define the expectations.
Yeah.
Because especially if it, like, let's say that if it's a silent retreat, if it's a sober retreat, and someone is expecting to pop bottles the whole week, like that,
right,
like, all those things, like, you want to make sure that they know. And especially, it's respect for the other guests too, who came on this retreat in order to, be silent, be with themselves, be with their thoughts, or, not have a week of detoxing and not drinking, or whatever it is. I mean, people need to know what they're getting into.
Yeah. So basically the message is, put it out there, as soon as possible, whether it's on the sales page, whether it's on registration, whatever. That way there's no conflict later on. We're always trying to avoid conflict. We don't even want to get to that point, not even to the conflict part. So, and the legal thing is much later, which nobody wants to get to, but you just want it to be a fun experience, something, seamless, easy, very clear, for everyone involved. And that's the goal, is clarity from day one.
Absolutely. And that's what a contract helps you do, is everything's in the contract, so that if they have any questions, or if they say, oh, I didn't know that this was happening, you can say, it's in the contract that you signed. It's on the sales page. It's,
Exactly.
please refer to this page of the contract. Please refer to this paragraph in the sales page. Like, this was all laid out for you and you knew what you're getting into.
And people will still try, even though it's on the contract.
Absolutely. They
right?
will. But they won't be able to.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the legal aspect and the insurance aspect is not the fun part of a retreat, but it does make it fun because of the clarity that's involved. So yes, we would like to ignore it, but if it's ignored, it could become a very big problem. But if you deal with it, clarity is there. Everything's very well defined. You don't have the anxiety or the insecurity of thinking, what if something should happen? Because we're all like fantasizing about this retreat. It's a fun, it's a fun week. It's a fun, whatever, few days. It's something that a lot of, especially anybody in the wellness industry, authors, event planners, whoever it is, they want to do this and create magic. And if they don't put this in place, they'll have that insecurity in the back of their head. Like, what if something goes wrong?
I always say that to my clients. And that's one of the most important things, is the energy behind what you're creating and what you're, the peace of mind that you have, knowing that everyone signed a contract, they all signed a waiver. So, if you're doing breath work, you're doing healings, you're doing certain things that, people may have never experienced before. They know that they've signed the waivers, they know the possibilities. And so you can show up at 110% and truly create that magic if you take the precautions beforehand. If you don't, and you're kind of like, well, maybe something will happen and we're probably okay. Like, nothing usually happens. My clients don't usually get hurt. Like, it's fine. You're still going to have that like gnawing at you in the back of your mind. Like, ooh, but somebody could, and it could get sued.
Yeah.
And if you have it in the contract that you limit your liability and you're not, you can't, you have clauses where there's always some reason why you could get sued, but you want to make sure you're like ironclad contract to protect yourself. If this person is participating in everything at their own risk, then you're like, okay,
you're free.
I'm free.
Right.
I'm free. I'm good.
You're free. It gives you freedom. That's what it does.
Absolutely.
Instead of like, imagine just always having this thought in the back of your head. How fully engaged are you? How fully involved are you in the program, in the retreat? You're not. And that actually, that energy is felt by others, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not. It is.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. People can feel that. And you just want to be, in everything, in every aspect of your business, you want to be in the place where you feel 110% you're going to show up, you're going to create the magic. And so that is one of the most important reasons to get those protections in place now, early on, and avoid, your energy being off, and avoid any problems down the line.
Exactly.
That could get really expensive.
Exactly. So tell us, where can people find you? Is there anything you want to offer the listeners? What would you like to finish off with?
Yeah, I would love to offer all the listeners of this podcast, I would love to offer you a free consultation with me. We can just, no strings attached, we can just chat. I don't usually offer this. So this is something that I really would love to just make sure that we drop in and we talk about, any legal aspects of your specific retreat. And yeah, I would just love to connect. And then also, so I will send you, I believe I've sent you my calendar link so you can post it in the notes. And then you can find me on Instagram. My account is elissakaner.co. And yeah, follow me for any legal information.
Elissa, thank you so much for such a generous offer to our listeners, and everything that you did talk about today. My goodness, it is so useful. What great value. I really, really appreciate your time, your expertise on all the legal aspects. And I'm looking forward to working more with you, in the future with this space. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Catherine. This was so much fun. I loved it. Looking forward to working with you too.
Take care.
And hope to talk to all y'all.
Yes. Until the next time.
Thank you for listening to the Retreat Boss podcast. When it comes to achieving wellness and transformation, nothing is more effective and profound than a well-orchestrated retreat. Achieve huge revenue growth, one trip at a time. Want to learn more on expanding your business with retreats? Visit retreatboss.com, when profitable retreats are made easy. Be sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show at retreatboss.com/podcast. Until next time, take care.